Welcome to another episode of the Gull Mouth Action podcast, where we take a look at all the latest goings on at Brighton and Hove Albion and Crawley Town. I'm Matt Pohl, and this week I'm joined by Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford, Sam Morton, who covers both Brighton and the Reds, and Sussex sport guru Steve Bone, who also co-presents the wildly successful Sussex Non-League podcast with myself. Danny Welbeck scored an extra time winner as Brighton beat Newcastle to reach the FA Cup quarterfinals after an instant packed tie that ended 10-aside. We'll look back at that fantastic win at the Magpies. Plus, we'll bring you the latest injury news as Albion prepare to entertain Fulham in the Premier League, as well as all the latest from a tumultuous week at Crawley Town. And I think even that might be an understatement. You can read all the stories we are talking about with videos and pictures online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. You can check out other great videos on shotstv.com and Freeview Channel 262. You may also be watching on latest TV, so thank you very much for tuning in. But we will start at St James's Park, where Danny Welbeck was the hero for Brighton, scoring deep in extra time as Fabian Hertzola's side beat Newcastle 2-1, an FA Cup thriller to reach the quarterfinals. Newcastle had taken a 22nd minute lead through an Alexander Isak penalty, but Yankuba Minter levelled just before half-time. Newcastle's Anthony Gordon was shown a straight red in the 83rd minute for pushing Jan Paul van Hecken ahead before Brighton defender Tarek Lamptey was then dismissed in added time for a second booking following a late challenge on Jacob Murphy. The game looked as if it would be going to penalties before Solly March played in Welbeck with 6 minutes left, and he calmly chipped home keeper Martin Dubravka to send the away fans wild. As we've just seen there, Sam, breathless game. Sum that up if you can.
Yeah, it was an epic win for Brighton, really. And I mentioned in a chat with Darren in a kind of previous podcast, really, where it was just kind of a bit unexpected. I think obviously with Newcastle, they're really strong at home, and St James's Park is one of the toughest places to go. And obviously we all were kind of dreading it when the draw came out for this one. You're thinking it's a really tough game for Brighton, and obviously they were in a great run of form going into it, so there was plenty of reasons to be positive, and they really did continue where they left off in the previous games, really, and they were brilliant in this game. There were 36 shots in the match with 10 on target, so it was a real kind of lively one with lots of kind of attacks going obviously in the game. So that's obviously great for the neutral, and that's what it's been really described as a really good FA Cup tie, kind of a classic FA Cup tie, really, which was good for the neutral. And obviously it didn't get off to the best of starts, as you mentioned, for Brighton, as they did go a goal down to Isak's penalty. And there's a lot of talk before the game whether he's going to be fit enough to play. And there was kind of hopes among Brighton that he might not be, because obviously he's just such a brilliant player and can make a difference in these kind of games. But Brighton recovered so well from that, and it was Yankuba Minter who gave away the penalty, but then levelled the scoring against his old team. Lovely finish it was just before half-time. And Brighton actually were the team most likely to score, and even more so after Anthony Gordon's ludicrous red card. I don't know what he was thinking, really, to push Van Hecken in the way that he did. Whistle had already gone, so he's obviously going to massively regret that, as he's going to miss the Carabao Cup final, and he was made to pay on the day as well. With obviously Brighton ended up winning the game in extra time, but they did actually nearly lose it, with Fabian Schär scoring a goal literally right in injury time of normal time, but VAR came to the rescue, and it was Brighton that stole the win, obviously through Danny Welbeck's brilliant winner.
Yes, well, it was a brilliant winner, was it? And his goal was his 8th of the season, and he is now only 4 off his record of 12 at Manchester United, which was in the 2011-12 season. Post-match, nice line from Danny Welbeck, who put his renaissance down to the good genes passed down from his mum and dad. But that aside, Sam, what has triggered Welbeck's rejuvenation this season, and could he win an England recall?
Yeah, you never know, because it really is incredible, the upturn in form. I mean, he's been brilliant ever since he's been with Brighton, really. He's been such an important player for them, and his experience has helped obviously some of the younger players coming through the ranks as well, and he's always been described as a real role model in this team. But especially this season, he's just really kind of found his career best form. We've said it so many times, but it just seems to be getting better and better. And obviously he's had a couple of injuries, and he was without a goal since October when he scored that winner against Bournemouth. But he's just continued where he left off, really, before those injuries, and he's just still such a top quality striker. And the quality of the finish against Newcastle was brilliant, and I don't think many players would be able to do it in that way that he did. And it was brilliant goal, and nice that Solly March was back in action to get the assist as well. So it was his 8th goal of the season, Welbeck, and he's now only 2 behind. He's only behind 2 of his Manchester United goal scoring tallies. and 1 at Arsenal. And he's 4 off his record, which was 12 at Man United in 2011-12. And Wayne Rooney was on punditry duty during the FA Cup weekend, and he said Danny was great to play alongside. And if he's being honest, he would like to see him back at Man United because he's better than really any strikers they have there. And they sold him 10 years ago. So it's pretty crazy when you consider everything like that, really. So it's it's great for Brighton, great for Welbeck. And he said himself that he's feeling really good, feeling fit and strong. And as you mentioned, he thanks his mum and dad for giving him good genes.
I was going to say, with the goal, I hate it when people say, oh, if so-and-so had scored that goal, there'd be massive headlines and that. But if someone like Messi, Ronaldo had scored that goal, because it was an incredible finish. It was like a roofed dink. I don't know what the phrasing is for a finish like that. It was just a brilliant finish, and I don't think he'll get an England call up just simply because of his age, but he deserves it for the way he's been playing this year. And do you need a bit of experience at international level there? I know we've got Kane and that, but put him in there. That's what I say.
Yeah, I think you could probably make a case for quite a few Brighton players, but like Jack Hinchelwood, I think, and Solly March would have been pre-injury, but I guess we'll have to wait and see, really. Brighton have now won 5 consecutive matches in all competitions for the first time ever as a top-flight club, and they're now just 2 victories from reaching their first FA Cup final since 1983. Match winner Welbeck said it would be really tough for Albion to lift the famous old trophy, but why can't they dream of winning the FA Cup, Steve? It seems like the most open it's been in years.
Yeah, I disagree with Danny. Sorry, I think they can dream of it. I think any team left in the FA Cup this year, because of the way it's opened up, can think, yeah, we've got a great chance of getting to the final, and actually we've got a great chance of winning it. I know Mark likes me to hark back to 2008 when my team, Portsmouth, won the FA Cup, but it's opened up in the way that did then. Back then...
One of the worst FA Cup finals ever, but anyway, carry on.
You wait your turn, you. 2008, Man United and Chelsea were the only 2 so-called big teams to get to the quarterfinals, and they both lost. Chelsea lost to Barnsley, Man United lost to Portsmouth, who went on to win it, in case you didn't know. This year, Man City are the only so-called big team left in it. We've lost Man United, we've lost Arsenal, Spurs, Liverpool, and now we've lost Newcastle as well. Aston Villa might claim that they're one of the big clubs as well. They're still in as well, but it's just very open, and you're already guaranteed a more interesting final than I think we've had in recent years. No disrespect to all the big sides, but when the final is 2 from Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United, Man City, Chelsea every season, it gets a bit boring, and you kind of forget who wins it year to year, unless you're a fan of one of those teams and goes and enjoys it. So now we've got the prospect of, we could have Brighton against Aston Villa final, we could have Preston against Crystal Palace final. Obviously, it's a great shame that Robbie Savage won't be watching it if it's 2 small teams. That's I'm sure the TV people will have to think again next year if Robbie's not going to watch it if it's not 2 big teams playing. But no, Brighton have got as good a chance as anyone. We'll come on to their tie in a minute, I'm sure. But I'm actually old enough to remember 1983 when they got to the final before, played Man United, drew 2-2 in the first game classic final. Brighton should have won it, the famous Gordon Smith moment where he had to score and didn't. And they then lost the final, they lost the replay 4-0. But no, if I was a Brighton fan, I think I'd be more excited about the chance of winning the FA Cup than about whether they're going to get into Europe again. If they keep focused on it and can keep injury free and have a strong lineup in that quarterfinal, every chance of a Wembley return.
Well, they'll have to get past Nottingham Forest, who booked their FA Cup quarter-final trip to Brighton after a penalty shootout win over Ipswich on Monday evening. And I'm sure Albion fans don't need reminding, but Forest absolutely thumped them 7-0 at the City Ground at the start of February. What do you make of that draw for the Seagulls, Steve? It could have been better, but it could have been worse, I think. And can you see there being a repeat of that performance at the City Ground?
I think, as you say, they could have had an easier tie, but they're at home and it's Nottingham Forest. And yes, Nottingham Forest beat them 7-0 at the start of February. But look at what's happened since then. Brighton have been unstoppable since then. They put that behind them straight away. I think they make up the goal difference in 2 games. I think they won 4-0 and then 3-0. Which was quite something. And I think it's almost been a turning point for Brighton, actually. I think the manager looked at his tactics, but burned his tactics sheet, didn't he, at the training ground or something? I think he's had a reset and a refresh, and they've looked very good since. Nottingham Forest, I think, after that 7-0 win, went and lost 5-0 at Bournemouth quite soon after that. Might even have been the next game. So I think that is in football terms, that's sort of in the dim and distant past, actually. And I don't think Brighton need to worry about that game when they turn out for this one. Different competition, different ground. Be a great atmosphere. Be live on TV. All the quarterfinals, I think, will be live. And Brighton players and fans will be aware of who's left in the FA Cup, and they'll be thinking, yeah, this is a great chance for us. And I would take them to get through.
Well, in the here and now, this Saturday sees the Seagulls return to Premier League action as they welcome Fulham to the Amex. The Cottagers, who beat FA Cup holders Manchester United on penalties on Sunday to advance to the quarter-final, sit 9th in the table, a point and a place behind Brighton. Sam, how do you see this one going? It seems that a lot recently we've just said toss a coin, really. And what's the latest injury news from the Albion camp?
Yeah, Fulham is not a game that Brighton often do well in, actually. It's one of those real bogey teams for them, and they'll be looking to avenge that defeat at Craven Cottage earlier this season. But I think Brighton will be going into it with confidence, but I think just because the form they're in, and I know Fulham obviously will also be on a high as well, coming away from that FA Cup win over Man United on penalties. But when you look at the table, Brighton are actually only 1 point above Fulham. So it's a real big game in that sense. Fulham can go above, obviously, Brighton in that race for Europe and cement there, obviously, what is a great season for them as well. So I don't think it's a given at all that Brighton will go and win this game easily. And they might also be without Karim Mitoma, which will be a big blow. So he appeared to hobble off as he left the pitch against Newcastle. It seemed like a problem with his left knee. Hertzler said that he'd have to wait for a scan to see how bad the issue is, and he can then say more. But hopefully it's not bad, and it's just a case of waiting to see how he is, really. If he is out, Mitoma, obviously it'll be a huge blow with the quality he has and the form he's been in. But Simon Adingra is a ready-made replacement that can definitely do a job, and I'll be confident enough that he can play well and hopefully help Brighton get the win. But as we know, Brighton are also without Igor due to a hamstring problem. James Milner's out with also a hamstring issue. Ferdi Kadioglu stood out with a toe injury. Lewis Dunk, I don't think will be ready after his rib injury that he's had. Jason Steele's out with a shoulder injury. Joel Veltman is out with a foot injury. And Matt O'Reilly, we think, is still out for illness as well. So plenty of kind of absentees for Brighton. But as we know, they've got such a big squad with so much quality that I think they'll be able to have more than enough to win this game if they play anywhere near as good as they have been in the last few games.
Absolutely. Well, best of luck to Brighton at the weekend. We will take a short break now, but stay tuned as we will be discussing all things from a very interesting week at Crawley Town. Welcome back to part two, and Crawley Town endured an afternoon to forget at home to relegation rivals Cambridge on Saturday. A Kamari Doyle own goal and a Paul Digby effort saw the Utes claim a valuable 3 points in their bid to stay in League One while plunging the Reds further into the mire. You were at this one, Sam. By all accounts, it didn't sound particularly inspiring from a Crawley Town point of view.
It was absolutely dreadful. It was one of the worst performances I've seen from Crawley, and it was such a must-win game as well. It really, just was poor from start to finish, where Crawley barely created any clear-cut chances. Quite a poor game to watch for the neutral as well, because obviously Cambridge are not much better in terms of quality, and they deployed some real dodgy tactics and a bit of gamesmanship during the game, which the fans were really angry about, and the officials didn't do a great job at dealing with it really on the day, and Cambridge obviously kind of had a bit of a game plan to really frustrate Crawley, and there was a lot of shirt pulling, and it really did get under Crawley's skin. But at the end of the day, Crawley didn't do enough to score, and they ended up losing 2-0 in a game they had to win, which is never good really. And they obviously did go down to 10 men as well, which didn't help. And I know obviously Cambridge got that red card not long after, but even after that, they never really getting back into the game. There was perhaps a little bit of a flurry in the last 5 minutes. We thought they might get one goal back, but it was too little, too late, and a really poor day and a poor defeat, which left Crawley obviously even closer to the foot of the table with Cambridge overtaking them. So it was a pretty disastrous day at the office for Crawley, that one.
Well, Tuesday evening saw Lincoln heap more misery on the beleaguered Reds as they thumped Rob Elliott's men 4-1 at Sinsel Bank. Crawley took the lead through Kamari Doyle, but the Imps roared back to claim just their second home League One win in 2025, and it sounded like another dispiriting one for the Reds, Mark. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was pretty awful again. It's such a bright start as well, and a really good goal Good work from Will Swan, Charlie Barker in the build-up, and then Kamari Doyle had the easiest job of just tapping home to an empty net. And you thought, oh, hello, we're going to get something here. And then literally, sort of for 20 minutes afterwards, Lincoln just absolutely battered Crawley. And they got 3 goals, and it was 3-1 at half-time, and the contest was over. Lincoln are a good side, so we shouldn't forget that. But they hadn't won. I think they'd only won 1 of their last 7 games before that. So you thought, Phil, well, maybe they were there for the taking. But Crawley, they had a few injuries. They had to make 4 changes through illness and injuries and suspensions. They had the news Tola Shawunmi was banned for 3 games after an off-the-ball incident against Cambridge. They only found that out just before, sort of a couple of hours before kickoff. Rushan Hepburn-Murphy obviously was missing because of his sending off Saturday. Liam Fraser and Brad Ibrahim both had injuries. So they were forced into a load of changes. That's not to say those players haven't played before, because they have. They've been first-team players and that. But, yeah, Lincoln were just too good for them, and they just looked a little bit all at sea in defence when they were put under a lot of pressure. They were better second half. Louis Watson came on, replaced Rory Feely. I'm not going to say too much about Rory Feely, but it wasn't a very good first half from him. But Louis Watson, it did change the shape a little bit, and he looked quite dynamic, and I was quite impressed with Louis Watson's performance. But yeah, it wasn't a great night. And yeah, Rob Elliott's interview after the game and Charlie Barker as well, just both looked completely deflated and just like, oh, what's going on kind of thing. But they got a chance now, 2 home games on the trot. A bit of bad news as well was Dion Conroy hobbled off towards the end as well. He played 15 games on the trot, which might be the most he's ever played in a row for Crawley Town. So, yeah, shame to see him limp off. I think I've sent Sam a little update for his Reading preview later. So he can update on that. But, yeah, it wasn't a good night. And, yeah, just sort of summed up the whole week for Crawley Town, which is a great segue for you.
It's a brilliant segue. As you've mentioned, unfortunately, all the main talking points at Crawley Town have come off the pitch this week, to Mark's delight, I'm sure. Things all got a little bit silly during the Cambridge defeat. After the second news goal, there was a reported confrontation in the West Stand and claims that the Red sporting director Tobias Phoenix offered to fight fans in the car park. Tell us a little bit more about that, Mark. It just seems a mess. What's happening?
It is really a massive mess. I mean, yes, the fans are frustrated at the moment because of the results. Performances, particularly against Cambridge on Saturday, haven't been great. And when the second goal in, I mean, it was reported that Preston Johnson, who was sitting next to Tobias Phoenix, they were seen laughing after the second goal went in. I mean, it might have been something different they were laughing at, but it's not a great look if that was the case. And obviously, a couple of fans saw this and reacted to it, and by all accounts, stood up and started shouting abuse at them. Dan Palmer, a Reds fan, posted on a Facebook page, fans voicing their frustrations when Cambridge went 2-0 up. Preston Johnson sat laughing, and Tobias Phoenix, the director of football, offering fans out into the car park. And then he followed that up with, after threatening fans in the West Stand and offering a fight them in the car park, does anyone know if Tobias Phoenix signed the code of conduct? Sorry, that's a reference to Carol Bates. She was sacked as a volunteer after a comment she made on Twitter, and Preston Johnson said in the fans forum recently it went against the code of conduct, which apparently Carol hadn't signed or seen even. So yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But we asked the club for a comment on this, and they said there was a confrontation, but Tobias Phoenix was cool and calm, and he was pointing outside towards the car park to say, let's have a chat. And obviously, yeah, so there's 2 sides to the story here. Fans weren't happy when they saw, that was Ben Levin, the vice chairman, who told me that. They weren't happy when they saw those comments, saying that it wasn't true. But what? It's 2 sides of the story. But Sam Jordan, the fans director, who we're going to come on to, the supporter director for the club on the board, or was, had a chat with Tobias Phoenix afterwards. We don't know the details of that conversation, but somebody from the security was in that conversation just to try and calm things down and that. So, but yeah, fans are not happy at the moment, and if you're going to be seen laughing, you can understand why fans react like that. But yeah, who do you believe? Who was aggressive? who did what. There's lots of different reports on social media, but it's just a complete mess, and it's just indicative of what's happening at Crawley at the moment.
Well, what we do know, as Mark alluded to, is that Crawley Town fan Sam Morton has stepped down from his role as supporter director on the club's board because of a decision owners Wagme United have made. Jordan, who has been on the board for 18 months, made this announcement this weekend before the Cambridge game on social media. What did Jordan say in his statement, Mark, and what was the club's response to the announcement?
So he basically said he joined the club's board in August 2023, undertaking the EFL owners and directors test with the hope and belief that he could build stronger relationships between the club and its supporters, fostering transparency, etc. But basically, he says he's seen repeated mistakes, a lack of integrity in decision making, and a failure to learn from past areas. And he said that's what and he was dismayed with the decisions that have been made, are being made, and will be made in the future. He seemed to intimate that he's aware of some things that will be happening that he's not happy with. We asked the club again for comment on Sam's departure, and they said basically they gave him the ultimatum because he is a board member of the CTSA, which we know held a fans vote. Again, we're going to come on to that. A fans vote earlier in January to what they think of the ownership, which the result was they want Wagme to sell up. And so they sort of said he's working for us and working against us. So there's a clear conflict of interest there. So he had to make a decision which one he was going to stay with. And they said, to Sam's credit, he put a lot of thought and time into weighing up the pros and cons, and he chose to stay with the CTSA. So he's going to continue to hold Wagme to account as part of the CTSA. So Sam's a very influential figure amongst the fans, very popular figure amongst the fans. So it's a loss in the sense that he's not going to have that day-to-day interaction with the owners and helping to sort of boost. They've got this new Devil's Advocate fans group, which is another group that is hopefully going to have the fans and owners working better together and building that relationship. But Sam's made his decision, and he's going to be continue with the CTSA.
And in further good PR news for the club, the Crawley Town Supporters of Alliance have said they have had no reply from owners Wagme United in trying to discuss the results of their recent vote. I will try and race through this bit very quickly, but the CTSA held a vote on the ownership in January following significant feedback from his members. In the vote, they gave members three options. Wagme remain as owners with the current senior leadership remaining in position. Wagme remain as owners except for new senior leadership to be appointed, including a new CEO. Or Wagme market the club for sale. And 60% want Wagme to sell the club, but only 274 members out of a possible 700 voted in the survey. The CTSA say they have tried to arrange a meeting to discuss the results, but they have had no reply. Another messy situation, Mark Dunford. Do you think Crawley will come to the table? And considering the numbers that I mentioned there, Mark, this is my opinion, but do you think they even need to come to the table considering the low turnout for the survey?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it is a very small percentage of the people who voted in that vote. But I having read what you read on social media and everything, again, that's a small minority. It is a little bit indicative of what everybody's thinking at the moment. They want changes, whether it's changes within Wagme or just changes at new owners completely. But I tried to contact the club yesterday to see if they wanted to respond to CTSA statement, and they weren't going to respond at this time, but they might do. It's just, I personally, I think they do need to reply a little bit, just respond in some way, just to show that they are engaging with the fans, because that's the main problem. There doesn't seem to be loads of transparency, and they don't seem to be engaging with the fans. But at the same time, are you giving that vote credence if you do reply, because it is such a small number? So it's balancing that up. And I understand why, but I mean, the CTSA in their statement said, we are disappointed that the club's leadership team does not appear to be interested in attempting to understand the reasons behind the vote. And it would be good to know if there were comments within that, when they did the vote, with the comments they came in, if they fed those back to the owners, and the owners could say, oh, right, okay, oh, that's how we become more transparent, or, oh, yeah, I can see how we can do this better. But by not engaging at all, it does leave that big barrier between the fans and the owners, which doesn't seem to be, I mean, always go back to they took them to Wembley last year. It wasn't all the owners. Scott Lindsay had a massive part of that. The recruitment, Scott Lindsay, the playing squad, it all came together. It was a perfect storm. I've written an opinion piece about Scott Lindsay this week where I've said that. But one of the better things about that whole season was you didn't hear much at all from WAGMI. But was that because the team was winning, so the fans didn't care? Because the team's losing, now the fans care. So if the team were winning now and all this was still going on behind the scenes, would the fans care as much? Don't know. Probably they would. There would be an underlying tension, but they wouldn't care because if the fans just want their team to be winning. If the fans are winning, they don't care about the outside noise. But because they're losing, they do care about the outside noise. And they've now, I think WAGMI have got to deal with this. And a big part of that might be using the Crawley Town Foundation. I'm a trustee, so there is a conflict of interest there. But I had a meeting with them last night, and the amount of good the Crawley Town Foundation are doing. And I spoke to Rob Elliott about it this morning as well, because a couple of the players were going to a Crawley school for World Book Day. And I said, how important is that? And Rob Elliott said, it's hugely important. Not much has happened in the last 2 years of players and managers interacting with the fans, going out into the community. And Rob Elliott thinks that's a big part of how they start to get the club together, everybody singing from the same song sheet and that. I know I've rabbited on there and we've gone over time, but
that's fine.
It's been such an awful week off the field in terms of the relationship between the owners and the fans. We saw the big Wag Me Out banner again. We haven't seen that for a while. At Lincoln on Tuesday night. So the owners have got to do something. But at the same time, the fans need to do it better. Doing it, we spoke about it at the time, doing it during the transfer window. If you're a player going to join Crawley Town, are you going to look at players who might be thinking of coming to the club? If I was a player, I'd be like, God, it seems like a mess there. Do I really want to go there? And who knows? It may have cost them transfers. It may have cost them sponsorship deals. I'm not saying it has, but it could do that. I could see how it would do that. So they've got to find a better way of working together.
As we're massively over, Steve, I don't think I've ever asked you about the situation. What do you make of it all? And obviously, Pompey had well-known issues with their board at one stage. Do you kind of see similarities between the two at this stage, or is it completely different?
Yeah, there are. Going back a few years to Pompey, we had a succession of sort of distant owners, owners that came and never really had the club at heart. I think that's different to WAGMI, because WAGMI have been, they took over Crawley with genuine desire to do well and to make a difference. And Crawley are now in League One, whereas they were in League Two. But when you start to get a disconnection between owners and fans, it can only go one way, and unless the two sides sort of meet in the middle a little bit and start to try to see eye to eye on a few things, as I think is happening at Crawley at the moment, it tends to go downhill. Everything that one side does it seems to antagonise the other. It's hard to see how that is going to be turned around at Crawley. If they stay up, if they can somehow pull off a great escape from relegation, that will help. The fans will be happier about that. And might sort of change their outlook towards the owners a bit. But if they go down, then the fans are going to say, right, what are these owners here for? What's the next step? How do we have any faith in them? So, it's not very pleasant for any sides down there at the moment.
Well, against this backdrop of all sunshine and light, you kind of forget that Crawley have actually got to play some games of football this coming week. They host Reading on Saturday and Charlton on Tuesday. How do you see these games going, Sam? It's been a bit doom and gloom for us, this podcast. Do you see any glimmers of hope in these two games?
Not really, but then Crawley often do play better against teams that are probably stronger. I think Crawley obviously do seem to struggle against teams they should beat. And on paper, both of these games, you'd expect Crawley to lose, really, because Reading, obviously, to start with, they are a team fighting for playoffs. They're in 8th, just 4 points below sixth place Huddersfield. They haven't lost since January, with an unbeaten record stretching 7 games, with 3 wins and 4 draws. I think maybe the number of draws can maybe give Crawley some hope. They can maybe get a point or maybe even better. But because they're 7 points from safety, Crawley, they simply have to win this one, really, because then it gets even tougher against Charlton, who sit 5th with one of the league's best defensive records. Only the top 3 teams have conceded fewer than Charlton's 31. They've won 3 games in a row, including that dramatic 2-1 win at Leyton Orient with 2 injury time goals. They've actually only lost once since the start of February, and that was a narrow 1-0 defeat at Birmingham. So there's no shame in that. And they were unbeaten in 6 before that one, with 5 wins. So this is a very tough game, especially against Charlton. So Reading perhaps more likely a win. Charlton very unlikely to win that one. And as Mark mentioned earlier, Dion Conroy and Bradley Ibrahim both seem likely to miss out. Dion is hope that it's nothing major. And obviously after he hobbled off the other day, and Ibrahim has been carrying something for a while, so Elliot said he just needs to see where he is and how fit he is to play. And they also need to assess Liam Fraser because of a horrendous gash he got on his leg against Cambridge. So a few injury problems to deal with, but Crawley simply have to play better than they have been doing and try and get some points on the board.
Absolutely. Best of luck to Crawley this weekend. And as the great man is here this week, we can finally go for a stroll down Steve Bone score prediction corner after a very, very long time.
It's been too long, isn't it?
It's been far too long. And we'll start with you, Steve. Brighton v Fulham this week. First question is, how do you see this one going? And the second question is, when you used to appear on this podcast, you always used to give a line on whether you like the team or not. So I'd like to get your opinion on Fulham, if possible. Where do they stand?
How can you hate Fulham? How can you hate Fulham?
I don't hate Fulham. I don't mind Fulham, actually. Had some good trips there back in the 80s and 90s with Portsmouth. No, I don't. In fact, I don't think there's any teams we're talking about this week that I don't particularly like, which is odd. There are about 58 in the Football League that I don't like. So I don't know. Brighton against Fulham, that's got disappointing 1-1 draw written all over it, hasn't it? Brighton have drawn more at home than they've won, I think, this season in the league. And I can see this being another one. I think Brighton will score early. They'll be ahead for about an hour. Fulham will score in the last 10 minutes, and it'll be another 2 points dropped, which will be massively frustrating for them.
Yes, it will be. Sam, what do you reckon will happen? It's a tough one to call, I think.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Fulham are not a team that Brighton like playing against. And as they've got a few injury problems to deal with, as I mentioned. I also forgot to say that Lamptey would also be suspended for this one after his red card against Newcastle, which obviously they managed to get away with on the day, but it will be a big miss, especially if Veltman's out. So probably expect Jack Hinchelwood to slot in at right back. I imagine it will be a good game. I'll say 2-2 for this one. I think, Fulham are a good team, and Brighton will be somewhat happy with that, I think.
Do you reckon we're headed for a draw then, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. I was gonna go 2-2. I just think, Brighton's record against Fulham doesn't bode well, and after the high of what's happened in recent weeks, I think they will be brought back there. Fulham are a very, very good side. Marcus Silva's done a great job there, hasn't he?
Yes, indeed. And moving to League One, as we mentioned, Crawley have got a home doubleheader starting with Reading on Saturday. Any hope there, Mark? I'm struggling to see any at the moment.
Yeah, it's the 12:30 kickoff this week. It's on TV. I went to the Majeski Stadium back in whenever it was, October, I think it was, when Crawley lost 4-1. And it was one of those games where you just did not know how they lost 4-1. They hit the post a couple of times. They had a couple of efforts cleared off the line. And they were hit on the break 4 times. I can't remember Reading having that many efforts other than the 4 they scored. So they can take some kind of hope from that. But Ronan Darcy was the best player that day. And obviously he's not there anymore. So, I'm going to go for a draw in this one. I'm going to go for a 1-1 hopeful draw, and I think that will be a good result.
They'd take a draw, wouldn't they, Sam? How do you see it going at the Broadfield?
Yeah, they'd take a draw. I was going to say 1-0 as well, so I'll be different and say 2-2.
I have a feeling we're going to get some Steve Bone realism here when it comes to this one. What do you reckon?
I've just remembered I don't like Reading very much, but I can't remember why. I think we may have had a vague sort of southern rivalry with them at some point, but that was a long time ago. I think if you offered Crawley 3 points out of 6 from the 2 home games, I think they'd probably bite your hand off. I think they'd say, yeah, we'll settle for that because it's against 2 form sides. Can't see it happening against Reading though. Crawley 2, Reading 3.
And then, yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mark, what was that?
No, I was just going to say it'll be a good game if it's 3-2. I'll be happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And on Tuesday evening, as we've mentioned, they're at home to Charlton. Sam, but what do you reckon? I'm not feeling optimistic about this week. You need to changed my way of thinking, I think.
Unfortunately, I don't see them getting much from this one with Charlton's form. 2-1 defeat, unfortunately.
That would be an all right result, wouldn't it? 2-1, Mark, if they showed a bit of fight.
I think any defeats are a bad result now. Yeah, I mean, what they do need to do is improve their performances, absolutely, so the fans can see, because the last two just haven't been good enough. But I don't know. Charlton weren't in the best form when Crawley beat them in early December. I think it was me and you were there, weren't we, Sam, that night when they beat Charlton, and Tola Shawami's goal that night and Max Anderson scoring the winner. It was a really amazing occasion. And again, if Crawley can somehow channel that night, I think Tuesday night under the lights, I know Charlton haven't got to travel that far, but I'm going for a Crawley win. I'm going 2-1. Come on, Crawley.
Blimey. Steve, what do you think of that? And what do you think Crawley are going to do against Charlton?
Crawley 3, Charlton 0. It's going to be the turning point.
Go on, Steve Bone.
It's going to be people have put too much science into these predictions sometimes, or Mark hasn't. League One, very unpredictable. You only have to look at the table. There's some good sides down the bottom, and there's some average sides near the top. I'm not saying Charlton are an average side; they're obviously in a good run of form. But I just think at some point Crawley are going to turn this around. They've had some good home wins. I think that's going to be another one, and they're then going to go on a run of about 4 wins out of 5 to give themselves a bit of hope.
Oh, we'll see. Well, best of luck to Brighton and Crawley. Although I don't think Crawley need the luck if they've got Steve Bones back in. It's in the bag against Charlton. I'm not going to worry about. Thank you very much for joining this chat, and thank you very much for joining us, Steve. This week's been an absolute pleasure. You can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we have talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk/sport, and you can watch more excellent videos on shotstv.com and preview channel 262. Thank you very much for listening and or watching, and we will see you all next week.